So the next interview we're going to watch today is Annie and Ian Fuchsia's Dragonflight pre-launch interview.
Guys, just in time for the launch of the new expansion, Blizzard provided me the opportunity to interview the one and only Ian Fuchsia. And for you guys, Blizzard is giving us a physical copy of the collector's edition of Dragonflight. For a chance to win this, subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below on what you would ask Ian Fuchsia. For more info on the giveaway, check the description. And with that said, I hope you enjoy the video.
Yes, Thorwald, we've already reacted to it.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down today and talk about WoW and Dragonflight.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
My name is Annie. I'm a streamer from Sweden. I play a lot of World of Warcraft. I'm a bit nervous, but I'm really glad to be here to have this opportunity to talk to you, Ian, who is, very well known in the community. And I'm sure everyone who's going to be watching is going to know you. But for those who may not, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ian Fuchsia. I am game director on World of Warcraft. I've been game director for just over 6 years now, and been on the World of Warcraft team for 14 years and been playing for 18. So it's been really, World of Warcraft has been central to the better part of my life at this point. And yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you. Let's just jump into the questions then. My first one touching the fated raids.
I just want to say to anyone in chat that's currently fucking discussing the whole, oh, but they shouldn't be good at interviews, you can't expect them to be good at interviews. If Yoshi P can do a 7-hour, 7-hour live stream with his community once every few months, and in a second, third language sometimes, doing it for English-speaking people as well as for Japanese-speaking people, I'm pretty sure that, the developers over at Blizzard can fucking do it too. I don't think it's that hard, especially if you consider that with the launch of Endwalker, Yoshi P went around taking interviews from literally everyone. He did almost a week worth of just interviews with different content creators. He didn't ask any of them to submit questions. He didn't ask any of them. They didn't give people massive time limits. They basically just said, sit down with Yoshi P and, discuss. And there was actually one interview where the entire interview sort of just became a theory crafting session on how to fix a certain class within the game. I can't remember what the class was called. It may have been the monks or the bard, actually. I think it was the bard. The bard has some incredible problems within how to, it just doesn't play well. It's not balanced well. And this, the guy who did the interview asked Yoshi P about this, and Yoshi P and this guy just started a massive conversation back and forth about how to fix it. Literally live streaming a theory crafting system on how to fix the bard. So at the end of the day, developers can absolutely do it. They might not be the biggest public speakers, but you don't need to be a giant public speaker to sit down with a streamer in the comfort of your own home with a camera on and discuss things that you should know everything about. When it comes to gaming, you should know everything there is to know about your own game, right? You are one of the developers on that game. So I don't see why this is such a big thing that people are sort of defending the Blizzard developers for. Oh, they can only do 30 minutes at a time, otherwise they would melt or some shit. How? How is 30 minutes different to 2 hours? I don't understand.
I think the fated raids have been a massive success from all sorts of different kinds of players. I've been hearing a lot of positive feedback on their experience with it. So much better than, how in the past it may have been a season that's been lasting for too long with not too much to do. And now we get a bonus season, a new season of Mythic Plus, a new season of PvP, and also to rediscover and re-experience the previous tiers of the expansion. My question to you is, what do you look to improve or change for the future? For example, a thought that I had was potentially bringing back older expansion raids into being fated.
That's a great question. Yeah, overall, we're really happy with how season 4 has played out, and it is exactly as you said. We know that I think it's by design. It's a shorter season. It's a different sort of experience. It's kind of a remix, a greatest hits look back at the expansion as a whole. As we all know that we're moving on to something new very soon, and because of the way our development cycles work, the last raid tier would otherwise tend to last longer. And so this is something the team came up with. So instead of having 8 months in Sepulchre, we could have 5 months in Sepulchre and then 3 months just taking a grand world tour. I think it's something we are pretty likely to repeat in the future in some form.
That's good.
I don't know that Fated as the exact framing will be the right fit if we do it again. I think that was, themed around the progenitors and their powers and kind of tied to the story of Shadowlands. But some form of, revisiting all the raids with a bit of a remix, a bit of a twist makes sense. We love the idea of revisiting old content and finding ways to keep that relevant. But at the same time, I think we want to be careful about, how we do that, just keeping in mind the fidelity of that content just visually and, how potentially confusing it might be for players, particularly in the raid setting where, unlike a dungeon where we use, revisit old dungeons now in current season 4 and future Dragonflight seasons, you can learn an old dungeon that you've never done pretty quickly. It's, a 20-30 minute experience, 40 minutes on your first time. Whereas when you look back at old raids, there may be a very big difference between people who did those raids when they were current and those who've never done them and have to basically do completely fresh progress from scratch on a limited schedule. That may be more stressful than what we really are aiming for with this type of season. We do want to continue to expand our time walking raids as a system, as a way of, revisiting that old content in a bit more, stress-free.
I do think the one thing that I would want with time walking raids is to drop the FOMO around them and just make them always on. Just allow people to always be able to travel back in time and go do older dungeons, bring them up so that they actually provide some kind of difficulty for people. And the way you could incentivize this is just through transmogs and different mounts and stuff. So, for example, if you brought back old ICC, you scaled it up to modern day, you make the drop rate of Invincible, say, a little bit higher. So if you do ICC in time walking, you have a higher chance of getting Invincible than what you would do it if you did it solo and just smash through everything. That way you incentivize people to actually run these old time walking dungeons. You also then have the opportunity to create these old raids for people that might be leveling still. We talked about this previously during the Denuser interview, where I explained that much of the story in World of Warcraft is actually hidden behind dungeons and raids, and new players never experience those, whereas these time-walking dungeons gives you the opportunity to make dungeons and raids a fundamental part of the questing experience going into the next expansion, and also allowing for new players to be able to join up because you have this new time-walking feature that allows for lower geared players to actually join higher geared players in order to do those raids as if they were still current, because there's always going to be people signing up for those time walking raids in some way, shape or form. And I just think that would be a massive improvement over the current system where every few weeks or every few months you get one time walking system that goes live, and now these are the only things that's available. It's sort of, what if I really want to be part of the Northrend one or the ICC one, but that week or two I'm busy with something else and I can't really do it. Now I have to wait how many months before ICC will come around again. It really feels bad, and it also creates just this skewed perspective on how games should work. That content exists in the game, make it always on, always available for people that actually want to partake in it. I think that would be probably one of the best changes they could make. Town Portal, how you doing, brother? Thanks for the first time chat. Really appreciate that.
Light way. One thing we definitely want to improve, I think one area where we just kind of let our players down with Season 4 is outdoor focused players. If you were focused on dungeons, if you're a raider, if you PvP, it was a great new season with rewards to chase. If you're someone who mostly plays in the outdoor world, I guess you had a world boss every week, and other than that, it was just a few more months of Zereth Mortis. So I think that if we do this sort of season again, we would definitely want to include a meaningful outdoor component so that there's progression for all of our players.
Well, you could literally, outdoors is the place that World of Warcraft has more content than almost any other game on the planet. The problem is that most of that content exists in expansions that are now completely dead. We could go through it, right? And we could really go through it. Look at TBC. TBC in Hellfire Peninsula, you had the PvP section. That's outdoor content. Yes, it's PvP focused, but it's still outdoor content. You could absolutely keep that shit up to date with new rewards and new things for people to do there. And people would travel to Hellfire Peninsula just to be able to do that shit, right? Then you go to Mists of Pandaria. You have the farm in Mists of Pandaria that could absolutely be updated and made part of the game. Outdoor players, I feel like, don't really need major events if there is enough things in the outdoors to do. If you have a thriving outdoor world, outdoor players is actually one of the few player groups that create their own content. They don't really need you to create anything for them. All they need is for you to provide the building blocks for them to create their own content, and they will absolutely do that. They just require the building blocks to do so. And it's already there. They just have to do it. You know, they just have to jump into it. What happened to our TCG, by the way? Not profitable? I have no idea, bro. Crowfar, how you doing, bro?
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's nice to hear that you guys are trying to think about all the different kinds of players. And it's a good point. Bringing back an old raid would feel quite stressful, since it is usually, or it seems like it would be a shorter season naturally. So that actually does make sense. I noticed the Shadowlands raid portals, the ones that you unlock when you clear them on Fated Mythic. I noticed that they're account wide. I was happy and unexpectedly discovered on my alts that I had those portals there. And my question to you is, how come the portals that you get for completing Mythic Plus 20 dungeons, how come those are not account wide?
I agree, it's a little bit of a quirk. It can seem like an inconsistency. I think philosophically, the vast majority of things these days that are cosmetic or utility are account wide. Really, some of the only exceptions have been some of the very highest end PvP rewards and some of the very highest end dungeon rewards, going all the way back to challenge mode armor and weapons from Mists. And in some ways, Mythic Plus is the successor to that system. The original philosophy there is some of the sense that, the class that you completed that accomplishment on when you're in a small scale PvP or dungeon setting is very important. And that when you're showing off some benefit, whether it's, a unique mount or having access to a teleport like this, it's a reflection on the fact that you did it as a mage or you did it as a priest, where in a raid group, it's inherently just a larger, more cooperative endeavor. I realize that reasoning is pretty flimsy. I think to some extent it's like this because it's always been like this. And it's definitely the sort of thing that we could revisit as we look to the future, particularly if we do these types of things more often.
You could probably just make it a lot more clear on a certain achievement. If, for example, you cleared a raid on your warlock, but now you're doing the raid on your mage. Whenever you link that achievement, it does say in the achievement that this achievement was done with a warlock, not with a mage. So that way players that want to take you, they have a fairly good understanding that, okay, he knows the tactics, but he might not know the tactics as a mage, right? But at least he's done it, so he knows what's going on there, rather than saying, well, you don't have the achievement on this character until you've completed the achievement on this character, where, it's like, if you want to try and get a raid with an alt, and you can't prove that you have a main, good fucking luck. Right? Even though you know the fight, you know exactly how that fight goes, you're just trying to do it on a different character, but you don't have the achievement for it. You could literally just add text there that says that this achievement was completed, but it was completed on, Accolonn and the color of the class there. So purple for my warlock, and everyone knows, okay, so he did do it, but he did do it on a warlock. He's now on his mage. He just wants to do it again. So, he's not going to have to go through all the learning shit. I think that could be like a reasonable way of sort of, compromising on that.
Yeah, and this is why I was surprised to see it. I did not expect the raid ones to be account wide either. So that's why the question came up. So it's interesting. I'd be happy to see some, potential more account wide looks on that as well. Another little bit more general thing here is over time, I've found myself removing add-ons for significant in-game updates. So for example, with Shadowlands, the notable one for me was the auction house revamp. And now with Dragonflight, we have the UI updates. That for me meant that I removed a lot of my add-ons, especially the ones that were, on action bars. My question was if you have any...
I would not agree with that at all. I think my problem with the new UI is, yes, it looks a lot better. Her American is good. Can't even hear the Swedish. Her American, you say? Like English is now just an American language. Lol. I think the modern UI, the new UI is a massive upgrade over the old one, but it still has, in my opinion, all of the exact things that I would argue is most important for a UI is still not really there within the modern UI. Like, I played with the modern UI for all of 2 hours before I re-downloaded Valve UI and just, used Valve UI. Because there are still just incredible things missing from the base UI that I need other add-ons in order to make that shit work. So yeah, I would say this is a good foundation, but they still need a lot more in order to make this foundation work, so that I can actually I haven't installed a single add-on. In fact, I have all of the add-ons that I used to have. I still have, because there's things that I need that the modern UI just still doesn't provide for me.
Other features that you would be happy to talk about or share that might, potentially replace some other popular add-ons?
This is something we're actually kind of eagerly listening to community feedback around, and it's exactly discussions like these, feeling like the new UI is great, but it has this one flaw that I feel like I need to fix with an add-on, or there's this one thing missing, and we want to get a sense of what the kind of most common examples of those are.
All right, I'll tell you exactly what is the most common of all of my problems. Okay, so first thing is the inability to remove the buffs from my character. So the buffs and the debuffs are tied to my character frame. Why? I want them somewhere else. I don't need them on the character. It would be nice if I could change it. The other thing is if I could change debuffs on a character to be a bar that counts down rather than literally just being an icon on the character bar. That would really help. And then, of course, in my opinion, the biggest problem I have is with nameplates. The fact that I can't change the way that nameplates look, I can't really make them bigger, I can't make them smaller, I can barely see them, and I can't put buffs on the nameplates, which is something that Plater, Valve UI's nameplate add-on, all of it can do it. The fact that it can't do it yet is just a massive problem for me. I would say, Ian, if you want to fix the base UI, literally just hire the guys that does Valve UI and just tell them to make the base UI. And that would solve all of the problems. Like, literally right there. Just import the entirety of Valve UI straight into the game. Easy life. No problem. From target and focus. Can't move X and Y position precisely. Marod, yeah, pretty much. There's the main problems with it is with sizing and movement. A lot of things are sort of packaged into a single thing, where sometimes, at least for me, I have my buffs and my debuffs at the top of my frame. Because mostly I don't give a fuck about those. Right? I don't care which buffs or debuffs I have on me. They're on the top of the frame, because there's only so many fights where you actually have to give a shit about the debuff that's on you. And, you have it at the top of the frame to see that if you have to pay attention to it. But having them on the bar is just useless to me. I want other things close to my bar that isn't just my buffs or some shit like that.
Are to help inform where we focus our future efforts, so it benefits the most people. One example off the top of my head, which is pretty small, but I think it is something probably missing from our UI, is the ability to view or interact with like the common map coordinate systems that a lot of add-ons use, or if you go to Wowhead.
Yeah, it's another question.
It's something that like you often just see players commonly sharing these around, and if you're not using a specific add-on, you don't know what they mean or how to interact with them. And while it's something that, was never a basic part of the game, it's become so widespread that it feels like players more broadly would benefit from being able to have that.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think the one thing that we're not looking to do, first off, add-ons remain a key part of WoW. We want to make sure players have the ability to customize their experience. That's not going away. Things like, DBM or bigwigs, or, fully sort of informational, computational problem-solving add-ons, that's not something we're looking to replicate with the base UI. We're looking, we want to provide that information, certainly things that weak ores might do in terms of...
I just realized something. Have you guys seen how small Ian's eyebrows are? Sorry, I was thinking of something else and I just realized his eyebrows are either it's like white hair to the outside or it's just really small. But I literally just noticed that for the first time, which is kind of crazy to me. But anyways, the thing that I was thinking about, Blizzard needs to do something about DBM and about Bigwig. So I was doing Halundris again, just this I think yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think yesterday I did Halundris. And the thing that stood out to me is, again, just how things like DBM have gone from just providing you with information to effectively playing your game. Literally, I sat there and I listened to the cues from DBM, and if you just follow the cues, your game is halfway played. It tells you that there's a thing coming that you have to move out of. It tells you that you have to spray it. Literally, it tells you that you have to spray it. It tells you everything you have to do. It tells you that you have to soak things. It is just... That's not what those add-ons were meant to be in the beginning. In the original, like, when they were created, they were supposed to take information that would otherwise be incredibly obscure and provide you with the ability to track that information for yourself. But you still had to think and look at that information. So you might get a bar that tells you that an ability is about to come off of cooldown and that ability will be used again. But it was up to you to figure out how that ability needs to be played. I remember when the first balls, the light balls on Alundra spawned, it literally said, the voice said, soak. And I was like, soak? And then I saw the balls and I was like, oh. And I ran into one of the balls, the ball pushed back, and I was like, oh, that's what it means. So I just, I fucking stood there. This was, of course, after one of the bolts hit the boss and it did big damage. And I was like, how the fuck do you stop that damage? And then I realized, oh, I literally just have to stand in front of this because the DBM told me so. Then it said, like a voice said sprayed. And the next minute there's this ring that comes around me and I realized, oh, sprayed. Great. So the add-on is telling me how to play the game. I just have to listen to the voice. I don't think that's within the spirit of how these add-ons were created in the first place. They weren't supposed to play your game for you. They were supposed to give you the tools necessary to play your game. And I still think that those add-ons are just gross offenders of that.
Making it more obvious when you've had a class proc fire or when a boss is about to use an ability. Those sorts of things, yes, the base UI should do adequately. But things that are like putting markers over enemies' heads or helping, assign or solve a problem, that feels like it would almost be defeating the purpose of the puzzles we present if the game solved them for you.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, actually. I was thinking in terms of the things that you just mentioned with weak auras, like being able to customize how you see your procs, for example. I think that would be really interesting.
Necro, so thanks for the first time chat. Really appreciate that. And yes, I agree with you. The base UI should provide you with all of the information that you require in order to play the game. So this means that if you're on a boss, the base UI should find some way, either through gameplay. So the way that Final Fantasy does this is every boss will have a very unique animation before a certain ability comes. So that So for example, you'll have a boss that pulls their one arm back. WoW has this as well with Muazala. So Muazala he stands up, he pulls his hand back, and that you shouldn't be in line of this arm, because when this arm comes down, you're about to get one shot, right? That is a giant animation that informs players of what's about to happen there. And then, of course, the other arm, that you have to run to the other side. So you could have that where the boss just have very specific animations before specific things come out so that you can look at it and realize, oh shit, that's a bad thing. I need to do this. I need to do that, because you learn what you need to do. And then, of course, there are things that isn't as easily, shall we say, shown within the game. So, for example, when a dragon does a tail swipe, for example, that might not be easy, especially if you have a giant dragon that the player can't actually see because the dragon is too big. How are you going to show that? But for that, I think there are other ways to solve that problem, like, for example, showing an area on the floor that you shouldn't be in a couple of seconds before you should actually not be in it. So I do think that there is still some room for the base UI to grow, and then I think add-ons like DBM should either be limited in what they're allowed to show or should just be removed entirely. But you first have to nail the ability for players to play the game without those add-ons, before you can remove those add-ons.
So yeah, that's an answer I like. So good to hear. Good to hear. Another general question, sort of. I've noticed the accessibility improvements in the game over the last couple expansions. We have the recent controller support updates. We have the directional targeting system that's coming in Dragonflight, and the interact with target keybind, which I just recently discovered and played around with. So my question is WoW coming to console in Dragonflight?
No plans for that at this point. I think there's a lot. WoW is a game that at its core was designed for PC, and that's not just the interface; it's also how it's delivered, and even including things like add-ons. But a lot of the focus
sad for the peasants
really has been with an eye towards accessibility, and people who have a challenging time using keyboard and mouse controls, but can use a wide variety of accessibility controllers if we support them. And so we're just very excited to have been able to do more and more of that.
Yeah, no, it's been really nice to see, because as you
Patch, that's true for some bosses, but on some bosses, the exact notification or the exact visual aid or, auditory aid is so insignificant that unless you're actually looking at the boss and paying very close attention to the boss, you wouldn't even notice it. Like, you would not notice that the boss is about to do this thing. And there's also a good chance that you might miss it if you're looking away for a second or two. So you are correct that at its core, it is designed for that. But there are places where I think Blizzard have also realized that DBM is a thing. So they don't have to go, that far in sort of, what's the word? There's an English word for this, where you, they don't have to put that big of a precursor into the fight, because they know the DBM is already going to track those things. So there are, I do think, a couple of examples of things like that in the game still to this day.
Say there's people who use a controller by a PC. People have potentially the setup connected to a big monitor. So it's nice to see that, being able to go back and forth between keyboard, mouse, and controller as well. So something that's inventory related. Shadowlands came with a lot of items in the game, which bloats our inventory quite a bit. I saw a wiki page the other day that listed 100 different anima item sources. Not sure how accurate that is, but many of them which contain an identical amount of anima even. And then we also had the research items in Korthia and several Covenant-specific items, such as the seeds for the Queen's Conservatory. So my question is, are you guys planning to be a bit nicer to our bags in Shadowlands? In Dragonflight.
Yes. Yes. I think it's something we experience as pain points ourselves. And, one of the ways we have to deliver progression systems or collections or whatever ends up being inventory. The challenge is when 6 or 7 different systems or multiple designers are doing things that involve putting items in your bags, suddenly, you're overwhelmed. One of the big things we've done in Dragonflight is adding the all-new reagent bag to pull all of that stuff completely out of the inventory space into its own very large, section. And I think that should go a long way towards helping. But ultimately, we need to just be careful with the systems that we design, with the outdoor loops, because often if you're just killing things around the world and before you know it, your bags are full, we're right back where we started, even if we gave you more space.
Yeah. I did notice the reagent back, and I really like it because it does affect things like, for example, the crafting materials in Zereth Mortis. I noticed how they immediately went into that, so that was really nice to see. Good change. Moving on to a bit more to do with achievements and collecting. So as someone who recently hit 100% achievements this expansion and will be attempting to reach 100% in Dragonflight, there's one achievement I'm looking at, the 2,000 pets collected achievement. So I'm nearly missing 500 pets, and I have all of the ones that are currently obtainable.
Jesus.
And my question is, are we going to hit this in Dragonflight?
That's a good question. It's something we need to revisit. We need to make sure, so some of those may have been made just kind of forward-looking, anticipating where we were going to go. But philosophically, there should not be achievements in the game that aren't currently earnable. Like, even if it wasn't going to be earnable until, let's say, patch 10.2 or whatever, we still should have that in the game before it's possible to get it. So we're definitely going to look back at those numbers.
Oh, interesting. So even if it's obtainable later in the expansion, it would still not be in the game yet, so to say.
Philosophically, yes. I mean, I think, coming from your perspective, right? Like, it's not fair to have this thing dangling in front of you that you can't quite read what you do. It's like, all right, you're at 99.8% completion because there's an impossible one. Just wait. That's not how the system should work.
Okay, gotcha. Because in contrast, I was looking at the mount achievement, which is a lot lower than what is currently obtainable. So I found that contrast interesting. But if you guys are looking into revisiting that,
I have nowhere near that amount of page.
Yeah, with the mount one, I mean, I think we're looking at, just how many people, what percentage of players, what number of players have, certain numbers of mounts. We also want to be very mindful when it comes to mounts in particular. There are many that are no longer earnable. There are also many that are promotional items that from the shop or collector's editions or whatever. We don't want to create an achievement tier that feels like you have to have either these ungettable things or these promotional mounts in order to achieve it. And so while yes, for some, hardcore collectors, they're way beyond the 500 mark. We want to make sure that we're not setting the bar in a place that feels unfair to people who are coming along today and starting to chase it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Back to pets a little bit. Do you see a world where we could potentially play our pet battles on mobile, for example, when traveling to work? If the functionality was added to mobile where you could also progress your achievements, like there's one very popular one, the 5,000 PvP pet battle one. I think it could maybe increase participation. Or what are your thoughts on this?
I agree. Honestly, I would love to see it. I think there have been a number of technical challenges that we're still working through. It's an idea that comes up frequently.
No, fuck mobile. Why would people do this to me? If you want to play mobile games, go play mobile games. Don't mobile jack shit. Fuck mobile. Oh my god, it's like whenever people ask about the console question. It's like, no, let the peasants play their own games. This is meant for royalty. If you have a PC, you play WoW. If you don't have a PC, you don't play WoW. It's as simple as that. Fuck. Oh, these peasants that constantly want to get their hands on our games. Motherfucker.
I think there's just questions of like what form it would take. Something that the mobile app doesn't do currently is like rendering actual, 3D assets and pulling creatures and spell visuals and stuff into that mobile package, because again, it's just a very different technical framework. So we'd have to change a bunch of things to make it work. Nice. But completely understand the value there. Like, it feels like something that, if you want to play WoW but you're not at your computer, you can make progress in the system. It feels like a good fit and something we continue to talk about.
That's awesome to hear, because it would be nice to be able to progress the little things while you're not playing, like the way that you've had missions in the past. I think it's great. All right, then back to mounts again. Shadowlands added many more mounts than any other expansion in the past. I think the number might be around the same as Legion and BFA combined or something. It's starting to get difficult to spot rare mounts from a vendor or reputation mount, especially when many of them are, potentially recolors of the same model. And so what are your thoughts on mounts being recognizable, such as, popular in the past ones like Amani Warbear or Invincible?
So there's a few pieces to that. Definitely Shadowlands had a lot of mounts. Some of that was the nature of the Covenant system and kind of times like multiplying everything by 4. Particularly early on when there was more of the sense of like pick your path. You wanted each of them to feel really complete unto itself. And then of course, as players were able to move among all of them more freely, that just became a very, very large space of not just mounts, but transmog and all the other cosmetics as well. With recall.
So, Nightshaft, I mean, the thing is, right, you have to look at what different people are interested in. So, for example, if I had an interview with Ian, I would not ask a single question about mounts or pets, because I can't think of a single thing in World of Warcraft that I care less about. I would rather PvP than collect a mount. Okay, and I fucking hate PvP. But I would rather go do a couple of battlegrounds than collect one mount. in the game. So I wouldn't ask this question, but Annie, obviously you could hear it. She misses 500 pets to have 2,000 fucking pets in the game. So this is clearly something that she cares about, and different content creators. This is why it's so important for us to get a lot of interviews from a lot of content creators, because everyone's going to have different things that they sort of want to know and different things that they care about. So I think... I listen to it because it's interesting to hear the different people that play the game, and I don't judge the way that anyone plays the game. You know, it's a game. It's meant to be played. You are your own person. You play the game the way that you want to play it. I don't have. The good thing is I don't have to play the game the same way.
Colors, you know, I think we try when possible.
Ace to Base, how you doing, brother?
Colors, at least thematically consistent in terms of where they come from, what type of activity.
Yes, alone. This is the one place that I sort of put my foot down and I say, I don't care. This is where I become a dictator. So I'm all for absolute freedom, except when it comes to mobile and console, in which case I become a dictator, and I would probably argue for the exile of all mobile and console players. And I think just I would be willing to start a political party in order to get that shit done. So yeah, those are the only things in which I don't think your freedom trumps my ability to dictate what you're allowed to do.
That, where, if possible, when you see someone on a mount, you at least know what portion of the game it came from. And the recolors are often available just for pure aesthetic reasons. You want something, you have a Mog that is a specific color prominently. It's nice if we make the mount available that matches it. We do, you know, when it comes to particular, you know, prestige mounts in particular, we very much want to avoid too many versions of those or reusing them in other places until a lot of time has passed. Again, so that if you see someone on, you know, the Death Elemental, you know that they got Keystone Master. And it's like, yes, there's different colors for different seasons, but it's very clear, like, that mount means dungeon achievement. Same thing for, you know, end of raid mythic mounts. We avoid reusing those until a significant amount of time has passed. So it's striking a balance, but I think where possible, players who are clued in should be able to look at someone's mount and recognize, oh, you did this impressive thing to get it. And where that's not the case, it's something for us to keep working on.
Yeah, because I do agree. I think the KSM mount does stick out, different colors for different seasons. Same with Gladiator mounts, and I think the mythic mount drops are also good. But yeah, I think in other places sometimes, like rare drops or vendor reputation, I think there's a little more blurring there, a lot, especially in Shadowlands. So it's nice to hear that you guys will, you know, keep that in mind, maybe also for the future as well. And following up on that, I have a question about a system of mount dies. So having a way to have fewer
this
mounts
is actually
overall,
an important question,
but
I think,
having
for
a
a lot
way
of people.
to then unlock dies instead, maybe similar to a Legion artifact weapon system. Is that something that you guys have come across as an idea?
It's an idea that comes up. It's a suggestion we definitely hear. Right now, it's not one that's consistent with how our items and mounts and just visual assets are built, both artistically and from an engineering like pipeline perspective. Because it's not, you know, WoW is known as having a painterly style.
I'll give you guys the short version, and then I'll let you listen to Ian's version, and I'll also give my opinion on it. So according to World of Warcraft, all of their armors and mounts and things are designed to have gradients. It's blends of different colors, and that's what gives, you know, the ultimate feel. And that's why you don't have dyes for your armors or your weapons or anything like that, because you would mess up the gradient for that item. Now, on the side of the engineering thing, I fully understand that. If your game isn't designed to really change the colors, that's something that you have to look into. And I do think that it's an important enough part for a lot of players that it is worth looking into in allowing for players to basically dye themselves. But what my thinking around this is, if you want to change your armor so that you basically end up looking like a dick wearing, you know, a pink suit of armor, you should be allowed to do so. That's the whole point of allowing people to dye their armors. If you want to look like a moron, you should be free to do so. And I don't care that it's going to make you look worse or whatever. So what? It's up to the player to decide how they want to look. And if I want to have a pure black piece of armor, then so what? You know, that's what I'm going to do. If you want to look like you have a giant fucking purple urgent member, you should be able to make yourself purple and, you know, walk around like a bruised penis. It should be up to the player to change whatever they want in terms of armor and also in terms of mounts. And yeah, you'll hear now what Ian has to say about it, but it's basically just that they can't do it because of the blend of different colors and shit.
Which often means, you know, sort of the literal vibe of brushstrokes and multiple combined colors in different sections, such that it's not like, oh,
Patch, are you being serious? Because that's literally not what an RPG is supposed to be. An artist has the ability to decide what their art should look like. You can't go up to Vincent van Gogh and be like, oh yeah, I think you should use pink here. Let me just paint this in with pink. An RPG, role-playing game, the player gets to decide what happens and what doesn't happen. That's the whole point of an RPG. Every option that you do not allow players to fully exercise is an option that runs counter to the RPG. Now, you could absolutely decide that, fuck it, I don't want players to have that option, but then you're still removing options from the player. I don't know what the fuck your argument is. No, they get to choose what you should look like in their game. No, they don't. They get to choose what armors they make, sure, but as a player, you get to choose how you want to present yourself in this game. That's the whole point of providing more option. But I don't... No, it's not their game. It's not their game. Alright, quick question. What the fuck... What happens to World of Warcraft if no one plays it? What happens to their game if there's no players to fucking play it? It dies. It's gone. Congratulations. You have this giant world that's fucking empty. Shut the servers down. It is the player's game. That is the biggest load of crock I've ever heard in my life. It's not your game. It belongs to the players. You're just making it for the players, because without the players, there's no game. It's as simple as that.
This piece of the shoulder pad or this piece is just solid purple or solid green, and we can swap those out. And because of that nuance, it's challenging to just say, okay, replace this color with that color and have it actually functionally work. That said, we recognize and we hear loud and clear the desire for more and more and more customization. And that's in all avenues, whether it's the dragon riding mounts that we now have, whether it's creating your Drakthir, we want more depth, more variety. And that's an approach we want to continue to bring to all facets of the game.
I really like that, because that also then touches on the idea of potentially having dyes for Transmog as well. And I think especially in Transmog, that's when it's most complicated with different colors and stuff. It feels like a nice idea to be able to just unlock those by getting the dyes themselves.
Very fucking true.
So that's why I wanted to see what you had to say about that. So thank you for the answer.
Absolutely. And that could definitely be cool. I think it's something that we're going to continue to talk about, but nothing specific to announce right now.
Okay. Another kind of big question, my last big question on collecting. So I would feel that it would be cool to be able as a collector to progress other professions than your main two. But currently the punishment for dropping a profession means that you'd lose your recipes, potentially the unobtainable ones. And I understand the idea of, people having different professions for social and economic reasons. But is there a way to maybe restore the previously learned recipes without affecting other people?
That's something that is challenging, but that we want to make happen. It's just a question of prioritizing it against, developing other new systems and things that, how many players does it benefit? I mean, personally, myself speaking as a player, I'm in the same boat. Like, I picked the character I play is, have a blacksmithing profession that isn't super beneficial to my character personally. I picked it up back when my guild was doing Molten Core, literally 17 years ago, so I could make all the rare dark iron stuff. And I have original vanilla Naxxramas recipes, and it's like, I'm never going to drop blacksmithing because we have things that are impossible to ever get again. Would be nice if I could change. Completely understand where the desire comes from. It's just competing against things like making the new profession system that we're excited to roll out to everybody in Dragonflight.
See, this is where I really do believe. So if you listen to Preach and his interviews with Ian and the team, so Blizzard have this sort of, I would call it medium-term design philosophy where, an expansion will start development about 3 years before it comes out. So they're already now developing the next expansion of the Dragonflight. They've already started. But I do think the one thing that World of Warcraft misses is long-term development cycles. So this is where you're sort of looking 5 years, 10 years, 15 years into the future, and you're saying, right, there are things that we would like to do in this game that is going to take us a tremendous amount of time, right? It's going to take us 5 years, 10 years, if not longer. So we can't really justify doing those within a single expansion, because then we wouldn't get much new content done because we're working so hard on getting the old content done. But this is where you want to have a smaller team. Big Travel Inc., by the way, thanks for the 2 months up, bro. Really appreciate that. 7 months. Part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Thank you. Where you have a smaller development team that already starts developing these more long-term goals. Like, for example, here, with figuring out a way to give players back their recipes if they change professions and they have recipes that they can never again get, making those work from an engineering standpoint. Well, get a couple of engineers, 2 or 3 engineers that starts working on this more long-term plot. Rather than, trying to take away work from the actual expansion, these guys are working to get long-form stuff done. This would be major things like graphical enhancements across all of the older expansions, server revamps across all of the old expansions. Things like this you could do, but over a longer period of time. And I do think World of Warcraft really misses that long expansion or that long view in terms of development, where if something can't fit into a single expansion window, it just doesn't get into the game. And then we always get this answer from Ian: that's something we would really like to do, but it's just trying to figure out, time and sort of opportunity costs of losing out on some new things, because, we wanted to give players this really cool thing, and that's why we really can't do it. That's not a good enough thing for me. I think you should have short-term, long-term, and medium-term design philosophies.
Right. But I think, it's something that we genuinely want to tackle, and it's not a this is never going to happen thing. It's just a question of when.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I look forward to hopefully one day being able to do that. On the topic of mounts that become unobtainable later, like Gladiator, Keystone, Master, ahead of...
Oh, by the way, thanks for the Prime sub. Did really appreciate it. 10 months in a row, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Sorry, I wanted to interrupt because I just want to make something clear. It's not a question of it will never happen. It's just when it will happen. You see, this is where they sort of make the same mistake as what my government currently makes with Eskom, the company that provides our electricity in South Africa, where it's kind of this hope that at some point the country will use less energy to where they'll be able to meet the demand. Because they can't actually increase the demand, so they're hoping that the country as a whole just starts using less energy so that, they can meet the demand and load shedding will stop. So it's sort of this wishful thinking thing. Blizzard is sort of in the same boat. They're hoping that there will come a time where the engineering department will be free enough that they can start working on all this backlog of things that they one day wanted to do, but it wasn't yet the time. When is that going to happen? Like, when do you envision yourself having an expansion where you're just adding so few new things and it's still going to be a good expansion that you can start working on all of these other things that you had just put on the back burner? That doesn't happen. You have to start working on those things now in order to ensure that they happen at some point in the future. And it doesn't matter how long into the future. It's like the housing thing. Whenever, people ask about housing, Ian's like, we'd really love to do it, but if we did housing, that would come at the expense of a raid tier, or like maybe a dungeon, or, a battleground or an arena, and most people wouldn't be okay with that. And I'm saying, well, okay, how about you don't do housing for Dragonflight or do housing for the expansion after Dragonflight? How about you tell players, we are in the process of developing housing and it will come in the future. You don't tell players when, you just say, we are actively currently developing housing, and we promise that it will come in the future. And then you just give players an update. Every 3 or 4 months, you come out with a blog post and you say, right, we've added the functionality, we've added the island, all of this shit is in process, we are busy developing it, and here's how we're developing it, this is where development stands right now, these are the houses, maybe show people some in-game videos of houses being built, and in the next 5 or 6 years, boom, everyone can build a house in WoW, because we started 5 or 6 years ago, and we started small. We had a small little team that was just getting everything, sort of all of the building blocks in place in order for this to become an actual deliverable, rather than trying to cram all of that, plus all of the dungeons and the raids and stuff into a single expansion.
The curve, it has the idea, or what do you guys feel about potentially some of those coming back, maybe several expansions later?
I think that's very unlikely. Some of those particular mounts, those rewards, titles in the same vein exist at times to mean you were there, you did the thing, and if you missed it, you missed it. The vast majority, like 99% plus of all of the rewards across World of Warcraft of every type, are things that you can go back and get years later. You can go back and kill old mythic raid bosses and get their titles. You can farm up their mounts.
It would be cool as fuck.
But there is a handful of things in the space that really are about, you were part of an experience, and if you see someone with it, you know that they did it while it mattered. And so we don't want to expand that space too much, but I think we're likely to preserve it as it stands.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's one of the popular questions I hear from new players, especially ahead of the curve mounts. So I totally understand your point. I just wanted to bring it forward to see what you'd say on it. So I think we're nearing the end, but I thought maybe I'd just throw some real quick questions. Achievement. It's over 9,000. Are we going to get another one for a higher number?
Are there any other meme numbers above that? I mean, let me know. I can think of a couple. They're maybe not so appropriate for a T14 rated game.
I wasn't going to mention that. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. But yeah, exactly. I guess there's no numbers around 30, no meme exactly. So, okay, so meme numbers, that's what it is, basically. That's what it takes.
Pretty much. That was 100%.
Gotcha. RBGs for groups of 5 to 6 people.
Yes, I think BGs, the size of BGs, is something we're definitely looking at and talking about a lot. I think looking at, effectively solo queue in the form of rated solo shuffle is an interesting experiment. That may lead to something in a similar space in Battlegrounds down the line. It's something, we've heard a lot from the community. So stay tuned. We'll have more to talk about later on in Dragonflight.
Yeah, it's coming, chat. Nice. Fucking calm down, all
right?
Import-export
features now in the game, and talents and such. Are we going to get one for sharing our customization of the Dracthyr?
That's something we'd like to do. It's come up a lot, actually. People who, either have spent 15 minutes making their Dracthyr and then realize they picked the wrong faction, or something comes up and they have to back out, and they're like, I had it perfect. I want to save this. Or you see someone else's and you want to, copy the setup. That's something we're going to look into.
Cool. Yeah, I found myself making 2 Dracthyrs on 2 separate servers, and I'm like, it would be nice if I could just copy it. Final question: which dragon aspect would you rather be stranded on an island with, and why?
Alexstrasza, she's hot.
Would you really be stranded with any of them? They're all dragons that can fly. Like, how do you get stuck on an island if you're a dragon?
Maybe there's invisible walls. Okay, you can't get out.
Well, okay, my very serious answer is going to be the future leader of the Black Dragonflight.
Oh, okay. Good answer.
Shit.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I think that is the end of our time together. Thank you so much, Ian, for taking your time to talk about stuff. This has been really exciting for me. I was very nervous about this, but it started feeling better as further into the interview we got. So yeah, thank you so much.
It was a complete pleasure chatting. So thank you for the great questions.
Thank you.
I think this was a good interview. I'll hit subscribe. Why not? Brutally rip the wings off the dragon in question. No, I think this was a good interview. I mean, obviously, look, guys, there's always going to be disagreements, but that's the whole point of video games in general. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to be things that I want that Ian doesn't necessarily want. There's going to be things that you want that I don't necessarily want, or that Ian doesn't necessarily want. But that's where it boils down to having those discussions and just being open about it, you know, because maybe there are ways that we can find compromises. Even if, you know, both of us can't be happy, maybe we can both be 50% happy with what comes out. But yeah, you know, I've never expected to agree 100% with Ian or with any of the WoW developers. I think it would be a scary day if we agreed 100%, because that would just mean that they would continuously design everything that I expect, and then there would be no more surprises. So how fucking fun would that game be? It's far more fun when I am actually a bit surprised every once in a while. So yeah, I think good interview. Not as good as the novel one, but that's not Annie's fault. That's just because, you know, novel's interview was brutal as fuck.